In today's video, we return to the nightmare journey that is my arcade stick, the enclosure. Since my last video, I had endured into a couple of projects that helped me understand the robots that are living within my house. Starting with the Need for Speed Underground front bumper prototype that we finally printed out that allowed me to understand the 3D pen-wielding robot that lives inside my living room cubby. The next side quest I would venture on is something I call a Case Collage, where I repurpose old games into a more wall display-like nature, like this PlayStation 1 Metal Gear Solid Integral Edition, along with this tribute to the Armor Core series, all to better understand the laser-wielding robot that lives on my balcony. Silence. Thanks to the development in both of these areas, I have now finally fell upon the final version of the enclosure.
But it seems I have put myself in a predicament once again, as I told myself I shall not layeth a hand on fighting games until the enclosure is finished. As in order to provide a quality service of fighting game products, you need to play fighting games in order to provide fighting game accessories. Goddamn fighting games, man, goddamn. Just like the first time we talked about the enclosure, I'm going to talk about how the influences and the prototypes from that video had led me to where we are now, along with the failures and the expensive plans that did work out at all. Anyways, without further ado, let's continue into the journey with the enclosure and find out what it's finna about to be. Okay, we're sticking with that. I'm not changing it.
Welcome to the revolution. Come on!
Now, from my last video, we talked about how the amalgamation of ideas I had found its way into the first version, the first aesthetic, the first prototype of the enclosure. With the wrist rest, the side plates, the rear auxiliary buttons, the move list, everything else that found its way onto the first prototype, I felt like was a really strong foundation. As long as I had those features on it, I think I had a really flexible platform to iterate on. But like I have many times, I tend to overcomplicate things pretty quickly if I have the freedom in doing so. Sometimes I might have the will, but boy, sometimes I do not have the way. So I gave myself an ultimatum, only 2 more attempts aesthetic wise, and if I didn't get it right or something I was happy with, I would leave it dormant yet again, which would eventually lead us to this was the prototype that came about after my first initial real try. But in order to understand why this is so significant and why I was so happy with this one, we have to take a seat down inside so I can talk about the differences from this prototype, from the first prototype.
As you can see here, the biggest difference from this version and my last version is the fact that this is one color for once, geez, or at least a consistent color. But the differences I made were small, yet significant. As much as I wanted to embrace the first prototype, it just felt like every time I grabbed it just kept me away due to its unrefined ends and sharp edges, which sent me in a spiral of pain, of physical and emotional, as I cared for this one so much.
Get off me! Get.
Hey, wait a second. Maybe I might keep this prototype. So in order to avoid that pain, I would round off the front and round off the rear, so it just makes handling the fight stick a lot more comfortable. And since I am running side plates, I would also have to make these changes to the side plates as well, just keeping that design language flowing from left to right. Speaking of the side plates, there are some obvious changes, going from a flat and featureless design to a more 3D shaped and can obviously accommodate an acrylic panel. I would actually change the side plates one more time after this, and I feel like that's the version I really want to go with. But for those of you who might want artwork in the side plate, this might be an option. I would also stretch out the top panel for the slightest bit of real estate for any slight chance of artwork in the future. However, the most striking change is the simulated acrylic panels from the leftover PETG that came with my P1S. This weird cyan turquoise really complements the blue. This little test here is what convinced me that I need more plastic in my life, which would lead me to getting the CO2 laser. Interior wise, it didn't change much from my first version, just a little bit more refined, a little more filament, just to get a better idea of what the final product would look like. The auxiliary buttons on the top were put to size, and now screw-ins and snap-in buttons fit. As for the rear section, I would make it a tad bit thinner, but not thin enough, as it would end up accommodating for snap-in buttons, but not accommodating for screw-in buttons. But I would rectify this in the next version. As well, still rocking an interior support. As you can tell how I'm talking about this one, I was really happy in how this came out overall. But when I looked at it closer, especially with this colorway, the imperfections had nothing to do really with design, but it was more in consistency. Started with one of Crash Bandicoot's best titles. All of my prints just started warping out of nowhere. My side plates would be flush in the middle, yet have gaps on the ends of the panel. Then the joint connector on the wrist rest would also work, making for like a weird fit. The top panel showed a hint of bed adhesion problems on this one panel, but the one after this, and after this, and after that, it just disappeared. Then the next discovery I would make was a slight cosmetic concern with the blue filament between the panels, which at first looked like a small inconvenience, but as I understood why this was happening, I could already hear the boss music for the second phase. I will not relive this trauma. Okay, moving on. You see, I printed the wrist rest in the rear panel this way, where I printed the side plates in the internal support this way, which would respawn their elusive enemy of print orientation, as the sides and the support were darker than the rest of the body, teaching me the hard way that print orientation also affects how the color comes out within the print. Now, if you're looking at this as a complete product or whatever, I am missing a couple of things, like having a bottom panel, which I actually put the bolt holes for the wrist rest in the front, but didn't put it on the rear. I think I was still in the middle of figuring out if I just wanted a panel just to sit on the bottom, say like my AFS, but I would end up going the route of my Mad Catz Versus and create a pocket for it to sit in. Now, when it came to the warping, the color shifting, etc., that's just kind of what comes along with prototyping, right? You're trying to find the flaws as you're trying to reach the completed version, and you can either address them right then and there, or you can address them to the lead up, and I decided to do the latter, and thankfully that would actually work out, because during that later time, I would actually learn a lot on how to accommodate those problems. I finally had the self-awareness and the self-control to tell myself when it came to redesigning, stop, no, and don't. Now, I would love to show you guys the 0 to the X version, but that one actually came out so perfect that I wanted to make it completely perfect by eliminating the layer lines on the wrist rest and finding a way to delete the seam that parts the two wrist rests together. However, just like the many superstars that we fell in love and, you know, have adored over the years, it underwent a transformation that had made it completely unrecognizable. That 0 version would actually be the version that pretty much I have been iterating on up until now. The only real big changes have been internal, but I'll share that at a later time, as I'm a stubborn dick and want to prolong the final version as long as I possibly can. As 0 would find itself in an early grave again. Nice shot. The following prototype would have a catastrophic failure, mainly due to my curiosity, as I found the perfect purple filament, which was like eSun ABS I think it was, that I wanted to use for this attempt. This would become the first experience I would have in layer shifting that of course would come in the most dramatic of fashion. Using my wrist rest as a model here and as an example, a layer shift or layer shifting is when the printed part is misaligned from the print head and continues to print on the wrong axis. Of course, in my experience, the print head made contact with the print somehow, pushing the build plate off the heat bed ever so slightly, allowing it to peek outside the P1S's door. Yes, this is how I found this. I would later find out that this filament in particular, the eSun ABS, would have a history of bad adhesion to itself along with the build plate, which could have been the cause. Instead of printing another one right away with different filament, as this was like a 17-hour, almost 18-hour print, I decided to take a break from the main body in pursuit of some curiosities I had at the time. One of those curiosities was making side plates out of epoxy using a 3D printed mold. This way the side plates can be curing while the print was going to cut some time. My first attempt wasn't bad with the flat variant of my side plates. However, using my side plates that had a bit more geometry would find itself fused to the mold thanks to some shitty release agent. It just like splits with, I guess that kind of says it, doesn't it? At least I kind of get a demonstration of what it looks like. We'll see. Next, I would try to combine the wrist rest and the top panel into a single carbon fiber panel, again using a 3D printed mold. It showed some promise in the early stages, but I just never got the result I quite wanted. Also, since this was a single solid panel, I would have to consider cutting custom layouts manually, which I wasn't exactly excited for my first time doing this. After traversing through these curiosities, I would return to printing the main body, but around this time is when the murmurs of moving out were slowly becoming a vague reality. Not to mention, I was going to America America for an event that would definitely keep me distracted. Especially since within the next 3 or 4 weeks, I'm going to be heading back for America for a short amount of time. This means we're slowly creeping into the current timeline of things, as the final prototype would be the first thing I would print in my new living space, along with the arrival of a machine I have failed to talk about since mentioning it, the Atomstack Hurricane CO2 laser. Since the Atomstack Hurricane's arrival, it's been on the balcony for its resting place while I've gotten comfortable cutting the enclosures panels along with my side quests and case collages. As convenient and as satisfying as it is to have it here at home just chilling on the balcony, I always knew that it wasn't going to be a long-term solution, so I would move it from my place to the shop I showed you guys in the last video and let this robot be in the environment that's way better suited for it. Now you're going to get this to its final resting place, which means back in the fucking box. Change the plan. I actually have a better grip on the inside since I pulled the tray out, so those are gonna go to the car first.
Oh shit, it is raining and it is monsoon season. Yep, we're doing a little travel while we transport the laser to the next location because having it on my balcony isn't exactly the most ideal location. I'm too far, we gotta readjust. We have to readjust, we have to do a maneuver. So right out the gate, let's just talk about why I decided to go with acrylic panels instead of 3D printing panels that I've done so far. Mainly this is just due to convenience. For example, you know, the top panel is so wide that I can't print the entire thing in one print or one go on my printer because the working area is so small. So I'd have to split them in the middle. And since I want the top panel to feel sturdy and feel as, you know, as a top panel of a fight stick should, I need to use a bit more filament in order to get that feeling that I want. And it'd take about maybe 2.5 to 3 hours to print one side. So if you times that by 2, you're looking at about 5.5 to 6 hours. Jumping back briefly into consistency, if you get something like that fail, I gotta wait a whole another 2.5 to 3 hours to print it again and pray that it just, you know, works out. So when it comes to acrylic, all I gotta do is make sure the protective film is on the front and back, make sure there's no visual damage, throw that thing on the laser, hit the fucking code for the orbital laser, and liberate that shit in about 6 minutes. This also means that since the working area of the Atomstack Hurricane is much larger than the 3D printer, I'm able to make larger top panels if I decide to do so in the future. So I guess it's kind of allows me to prepare myself for maybe an enclosure XL or something that could accommodate maybe like a cross-up or like a hit stick layout or something. I can just do it right there with the CO2 laser and not even think about it. Hence how the Case Collage pretty much came alive, because since I noticed I had so much of this surface area to work with, I thought I might as well utilize it and make some things that I've never really thought about doing before. I've always had games and stuff that I wish that can be more present, I guess you can say, because like, you know, they just live in a case and you just put them somewhere and never see them again. All right, so we're pulling up to the shop in about a couple of seconds here, and I feel like if I missed anything, I'll just cover it in the voiceover.
One of the only things that come to mind is the fact that I was able to remove the middle support. Since the acrylic panel is just one panel and I didn't have the need to support the middle for a split panel, obviously I was able to remove it, making the internal design a lot easier and way more straightforward, especially since I found an easier way to support the panel without it. Not to mention, when acrylic panels are done well, it looks nice and professional. If I forgot anything, it's probably just negligible for me to even mention, but the one thing that is absolutely not negligible is to make sure this thing works after transport.
Before actually doing the cutting, I figured I'll show you guys what it looks like inside. Here we have like a, obviously this is like a 5mm acrylic panel. You got a little LED bar here in here so I can see when it's a little darker than usual. The head, this is the head that does all the things. And actually, before I forget, I have to make sure this is actually at the right height. So you use this little autofocus button. Oh, it's shy. So that now it knows it's a 5mm panel. I already have my settings all ready to go. The surface area, I think, or the work area, is about 500 by 300. So it's quite a lot bigger than my 3D printer. So we're just gonna cut this panel real quick. Actually, let's home this. So we're gonna go ahead and go set this back to home. Oh, hell tripping, this is not even connected. I totally forgot, but first we gotta frame it to make sure it's not gonna go where it doesn't need to go. We'll move this over a bit, actually. Cool. Let's go ahead and do the thing. All right, it's still pretty loud, but we did just finish the cut. I wonder what this could possibly be for.
It's kind of wild that an idea from my head has finally materialized into a physical product and became a representation of what that idea was/is. As we go into the final steps of what the enclosure's completed version is going to look like, I would just like to send an appreciation to all you guys who have encouraged me to see this thing all the way through. So as per usual, thank you guys for watching. Peace out. Until next time.
Welcome to the revolution. Hey, come on, come on!